I want to do and what it is that my work is in all of its expressions is to take this massive strategy and this massive lens, which could feel very theoretical, impossible to grasp, et cetera, and render it completely practical. So that is the work that I'm doing. I'm not taking super performers and asking them to pontificate their belly buttons and maybe move to an ashram. I'm asking for them to kick ass on a 3D level.
Hello, my friend. Welcome to the Gabby Rosley podcast, a platform devoted to expanding our lives by connecting to the wisdom of the collective. Through relatable discussions on topics like communication, connection, leadership, science, and spirituality, we offer revolutionary perspectives and practical tools for creating positive change, right here, right now. But I don't want this to be some stiff lecture hall-esque vibe, so we make it fun, raw, and real. With expert guests and relatable conversations, my goal is to inspire you to break through limitations and remember that it is possible to live a life you're excited to wake up to every day. Thank you for being here and enjoy the episode. Welcome back, everyone, to the Gabby Rosley podcast. It's been a little while since I have had a guest on the show, so I'm really excited. Dr. Amy and I were just talking before we hopped online about spring energy and the sun. It's shining here in Michigan, so I'm feeling good. This energy feels like my cells are just screaming in aliveness. So I'm very excited for the conversation that we're going to have today. I have this grounded energy coming in to our chat, and I feel like Dr. Amy is going to really allow us to raise new heights, but then keep it grounded in the way we're going to be able to integrate all of this. So I'm going to give a little bit of background about Dr. Amy and let you guys know why she's here in the conversation that we're going to have today. I am very passionate about connecting the three-part system that we are: mind, body, and spirit. And with all of that said, the mind is one of my favorite tools. Sometimes it's also my worst enemy, but to really help us blend consciousness, which we will go more in detail about later, and transformation with neuroscience to shift from stress and reactivity into clarity and flow and expansion, really to reach our potential. We're going to talk all about what Dr. Amy does. And Dr. Amy is a doctor of Chinese medicine, and she's also an executive coach and neurotech pioneer. So she bridges a lot of the parts that we are and that we experience. And she goes beyond the traditional mindset work and really helps to create real-time neurological shifts that support deep and lasting change. Through Whole experience, she integrates cutting-edge neurofeedback with psychology and spiritual frameworks to help people unlock their fullest potential right here, right now. So today we're going to be talking about the nervous system, how we can reprogram it, and really just experience more of this joy, more of this connection, and more of this lasting success. So Dr. Amy, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Gabby. Well done with the intro. There's so much to cover, really. I think one of the things that people will say to me, wait a minute, you do science and spirituality, you do the mystical and the quantifiable. And my answer is yes. And also executive coaching. And I'm also a doctor of Chinese medicine, because I think that the real way and the new model that we're moving into is that it's all kind of blended together. So rather than it being like pie slices, like here you have work, and then here you have family, and here you have your spirituality, right? Or here's like these constructs of science, like how do they all really work together and blend and play to create our reality? Because we don't actually live inside of pie slices. It's not true.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah.
So I kind of want to start there about this idea of blending in order to reach the highest potential, because I feel like dividing ourselves and sectioning our life off into slices of this pie doesn't allow us to experience the whole, which in my mind, that's really what it means to access your full potential, is to access all parts of you and then bring them into the areas of your life without, okay, no, this is spiritual, so I have to leave it, at home when I go to work, or, oh, but this is professional, it's really systems oriented, I have to leave this out of my relationships. I feel like when I think about accessing your full potential, it's taking all of the slices of the pie, bringing them together and serving the whole pie, eating, and tasting all the parts of the pie. So what do you think about this process of activating your full potential or accessing in the work that you do? How do you guide your clients through the understanding of what that means?
Yeah, it's a massive question, Gabby, and I so appreciate it. And I love how you're describing even the frame of it. It's basically understanding that we are a timeless soul on an endless journey, and that we are a marvel and a miracle, and that we can't understand Timeless soul, endless journey, marvel, miracle. These are giant words. So I want to just reframe this because we think of ourselves as like the personality, our name, our gender, what we do for a living, if we're a parent or not a parent. Like there's these things that are basically these thought constructs of the mind. And they're not very helpful when we want to be in that penultimate strategy of living out our highest purpose, of being the most deeply fulfilled that we can be. Like we can't take these little micro units of a bigger macrocosm and then end up with something strategic. We end up with something that feels more like being a hamster on a wheel, struggling to prove or please or just get enough sleep and make it through the day or the week. Right. And this is, I think, we've suffered maybe what would be considered a pandemic here recently. And I would say that the biggest pandemic is the desire for meaning and purpose and to feel whole and to feel connected and to know that we are enough. And so you don't get that by being so zoomed in and like our nose up against the glass of like whatever we think is so important in that moment. So when we go into the constructs like timeless soul on an endless journey, think about timeless, think about endless. The construct of infinity is not something that we can actually conceive of at the level of the mind, right? Like if I say to someone, tell me how many trees there are on the earth, we could maybe have somebody guesstimate the number of trees, but what does that number even mean to us? If we said, how hot is the sun? We can read the number and memorize it on the page, but can we actually feel or know what that quantity is? And what does it mean, infinite, right? So I'm like immediately going into these giant constructs, I know, but if we believe, and not everybody on the show maybe does, but not every listener might, and that's totally fine. But if we believe in that construct of something infinite, that we are souls that potentially either reincarnate or are everlasting in heaven or whatever our frame is, what does that mean? Right. And so then,
Yeah, like
so
what does
then,
it really mean? Because you can talk about it, but I do believe that the discussion is what allows for little pieces to be remembered throughout a conversation where you flow back and forth without the attachment to like having a full understanding. It's more of a feeling and an experience
yeah,
because you're never going to really be able to intellectually put into like this is exactly what it means, equation x equals y, or whatever.
no, for
So,
sure.
so it's an experience of having this dialogue, and I think that is the most important part of this process is having more people talking about this kind of thing. And so it can be very high in the sky understanding of, okay, this is what we're talking about, but what does that really mean for existence? But it's more of an
Hmm.
experience internally of like, let's go ahead and explore what this could mean because we're activating that imagination and that pull of
Yeah.
contemplate.
Totally. And within the constructs, what I want to do and what it is that my work is in all of its expressions is to take this massive strategy and this massive lens, which could feel very theoretical, impossible to grasp, et cetera, and render it completely practical. So that is the work that I'm doing. I'm not taking super performers and asking them to pontificate their belly buttons and maybe move to an ashram. I'm asking for them to kick ass on a 3D level, right? And also be aware of this, because it's one way of saying it simply is like just step out of the matrix. Well, if it was that easy, wouldn't everybody, right? And so how do we learn how to be inside of this incredible game and magical unique mystery of life? How do we live inside of that deepest fulfillment and wisdom and still be quite masterful in the 3D realm of it, right? Like still have incredible careers or families, whatever it is that we are here for, right?
I'm so happy that we're having this conversation today because I was on my way to a meeting with my best friend. One of the other businesses that I have, we're launching our first group travel trip in August. So we were getting together and it's a really exciting business. But I had just gotten basically a bill for a car repair. And I was like, oh my gosh, every time I get a bill, I'm like, all right, here we go. And I just had this idea of I've been super high vibe, if you will, of like really just radiating this gratitude for everything going on in my life, my relationships. I'm embarking on a new transition and chapter. I'm moving to Chicago in a week and I'm really
Mm,
excited and it feels awesome. But I'm like, okay, wait, how do I ground this into the ability to support myself financially with my career and taking action steps because I know that it's important to to step into the energy of, abundance and wealth and joy. But the grounded, rooted, practical integration of that all is so important. And so I'm so glad that we're having this conversation today.
Yeah, totally. So I've been on a spiritual path for 30 years. That's probably longer than some of the listeners have been alive.
Yeah.
And what I can say is that I've seen a lot of trends, and it's super interesting because back when I got started on this, nobody was talking about it. So the construct of that we can have a vibe that's going out about money and that matters. Maybe it was sort of born more publicly of that movie, The Secret, that is a classic that came out so long ago. But I would say that because I've kind of watched and really worked to help people get results and be in that most grounded way. I think that there's some really basic and fundamental principles inside of that high vibe approach that are missed or misconstrued. So I'll bring that into the conversation right now, which I feel like is as a part of let's make this really real. So what I talk about inside of this is, or what I can share about it right now, is that a lot of the times, for instance, our relationship to money has everything to do with safety and security. Safety and security are set in utero. They're set from past lives, if you believe in such things. They're also set in that first 7 years of life. Often we don't have memories on a conscious level of the first 7 years of our life, right? We don't remember or understand the dynamics that our parents, like we could feel the energy that they were in about money, but we couldn't necessarily name it. We didn't even understand money when we were 3. So we have those kind of things, but we also have like, what was that safety imprint and all of that? So basically we have on an energy level, energy is not an abstract, like philosophical kind of thing. It's like, think of it like units, like little pebbles, or, when I see as a clairvoyant energy, it is very, very tactile. It is very real. And so what I see when people have these early childhood wounds or early impressions around finance, or maybe it's a later in life trauma, is that they have stuff that is literally mucking up their field. And that muck usually happens from the abdomen down. It's in their gut. It's impacting their digestive system. It's impacting their gynecological health. It's impacting, their basic feelings of safety and survival in ways that they can't even consciously necessarily name. Okay, now, if that's what's going on, and then we take this thought construct, which is what it is for most people, I have to think happy thoughts. I need to exude good vibes. Now, remember, most of the action of the real money clog is actually down below, like let's say the rib cage and below, but then we have the mind up here generating some thoughts about how we're going to fix it. And so the mind is now basically more empowered to dismiss and suppress the very things that will help for the deep, restored, full, complete healing of those early childhood wounds, the clearing of those chakras for those that want to go with the chakras terminology. So what we have is the what is, and then what we have is the what we wish would happen, which is another version of basically trauma, because what we can do is then become a bit of a refraction inside of all of this. That's like, wait a minute, I'm not supposed to be stressed out when I get a big giant bill, but I am stressed out when I get a big giant bill. Oh, wait a minute, I'm supposed to be doing good vibes, but wait a minute, I can't find my good vibes. And then, and so then now we have more stuff. We have the original thing, and then we got the thing that's the reaction to the thing.
Yes, because when
happening.
I experience these negative thoughts, I'm like, no, stop them, because I don't want to attract any more of them. And like, I kind of move past that a little bit, because now I realize that it's like, actually, can you just sit with this and can you observe this and not try to suppress it? Because then it can metastasize, right? But I used to get so worried of like, no, you can't act this way or you can't think this way, because then you create more of this in your reality. And it was just this cycle that keeps resurfacing. And so, yes, I think so many people resonate with that.
Totally. Well, and it still can be there on a subconscious level, but like, wait a minute, I'm not being the good girl right now, or I'm not being the good student right now, or, oh, I don't really want to sit with my emotions. But then here's another thing that's extremely practical. If we sit with our emotions in an untrained way, in an unskillful way, we can actually hold them and just be sitting with them, which is not exactly a great idea for this whole construct that we're talking about, right? Like we're kind of creating rewounding. And there is obviously something to the vibe thing. Like we don't actually want to be just like holding it and then emitting that, right? So it kind of becomes the question of then how do we become very skillful? How do we find the way not to take shortcuts, but to shorten the amount of time to get down to a deeper bedrock. And so then I come back to the original point, timeless soul on an endless journey, right? Because if you think of yourself as Gabby and you're like, okay, automatically we're refracting, we're changing this beautiful rainbow, or this beautiful constellation of stars in the sky. Like, what is the infinite that is your soul? And we're taking it down to this like moment in time self-perception. And we know that you are flawed. We are each flawed as humans in our self-perception, because to the point we made earlier, also, we kind of can't be accurate, because concepts of infinity, timeless soul, or like what's the possibility within a human to create a miracle or to intuitively know something, right? It's not even a possible construct. So, being able to navigate kind of the full spectrum of what like actually can happen inside of us, right? And so then the deeper dive from there is, how do we alchemize? How do we get in touch with? How do we allow ourselves to do that deeper work, do it intentionally, do it effectively? And then when we're not in it, not be stuck in it, and shift over into the resonance of gratitude, the resonance of possibility, right? Because in order to go into that wounding work, we have to kind of remember what it was like to be 3 or whatever. Right. And there is a little bit of a shrink. So intentionally then coming back out of that shrink when we're done is essential.
Yeah. So you talked a little bit about coming up to the mind, trying to deal with issues that are actually stemming from the lower half of your body, abdomen and below. I want to talk a little bit about the nervous system, because we're talking about the body and like the lower centers that are holding things, emotions, traumas, and we're trying to think our way out of stress, which
Mm-hmm.
is, it doesn't really work long term,
No,
not sustainable,
totally.
right? So I want to talk a little bit about the nervous system and what's actually going on when we are under stress, or when I get a bill and I'm
Mm-hmm.
thinking, oh my gosh, how am I gonna maintain high vibe? Basically, like, what's
Right.
going on inside our bodies?
Yeah, there's so much to it. Great question. A lot of people will put a lot of credit on the vagus nerve, and I just would like to call out that the vagus nerve is important, but it's also downstream of the brain. Right. And so where I really focus is in the brain. And my colleague and I run programs to help people to, in a very masterful and quick way, change their brain, their neurology of their brain, like let's say by 40% in 5 days. So that's a bit of framing and context for the conversation that we're in, right? That then grows in over time, because that's how brains do. So that's an immediate shift of roughly 40%. So
Amazing.
within that, if I talk about what's happening in the brain, a lot of it comes from that safety and survival signaling. So another place that people point to is the amygdala. By the way, there are 2 of them. There is a right amygdala and a left amygdala. Most people don't know that they have 2 amygdala.
It's
So
news
I
to
just
me.
love, yeah, I know most people don't, because it's like the word deer. Like there could be a whole
Yeah.
family of deer and you're saying a singular, right?
Yes.
And so there's 2 amygdala, and they get a lot of their information from the cerebellum. The cerebellum used to be thought of, it's in the back of the brain, and it's, like not the size of a fist, but kind of that shape in the back of the brain. And the cerebellum used to be thought to do just like the ability to walk or talk, or like, put your fingers to your nose if you were to get pulled over in a DUI test or something like that, right? Those are like the old school cerebellum ideas. But what's been recently discovered in the last, let's say, 5 or so years, more or less, has been that there's a massive interplay into the sense of safety. And that when we work with the cerebellum, we can find paths through for things like alcoholism or other things that have to do with addiction.
Mm.
So basically, if we take then this construct of addiction in the mind, and that our cerebellum can basically help us to loop in addictive patterns, right? And then the cerebellum sends that information lots of places, but I'll just talk about the 2 amygdala for now. One amygdala is 100% focused on threat detection, fear, assessing the situation, trying to find patterns, right? The other amygdala has a combination that is actually responsible for joy and bliss, and also a little bit to do with fear.
And would that be the left side, the left amygdala, that is the joy and the bliss?
I think it's the right side actually, but please
Okay.
don't hold me to that. Yeah.
Yes, yes. Okay. I was like, interesting. Yeah.
Yeah. But what I do know about these is that there's that allocation, and the amygdala, also, just as a general context, is a part of what stamps something as being worthy of being stored in long term memory, which
Mm.
then that's happening not entirely, but that's also kind of like associated with the hippocampus, which is another friend there, another structure in the brain, right? So, do you know the old, what do you call it? The legend or the story of the wolf that you feed?
No, I
Have you
don't.
heard that story?
Uh-uh.
Okay, so there's I forget which of the Native American nations, but in one of the traditions of I believe Native North America, there's a grandfather and he's talking to this boy, and and he's telling the boy there's two wolves, and basically which wolf you feed is the wolf that you is the one that's going to win. And I'm just kind of making a very short summation. So these are the kind of parallels. I love to take the Native American myth of which wolf, the dangerous wolf, is going to win, or the kind wolf, which one is going to win, and apply that to the amygdala and how the brain is working, right? Because we don't want to say our amygdala is bad and it should calm down. We actually want for the joyful aspects to come forward, and we want to be able to remember, right? Sometimes what can happen when we get a lot of pain is we have sort of an amnesia that comes over because we don't want to remember. We don't want to think about what's happening on the other side of the world right now. There's just too much collective pain for us to hold. But as we look at the way that this nervous system functions, whichever amygdala is getting the most action is the one that literally grows in its size.
Mm.
So we can measure then, for instance, and the reason that I am not the neuroscientist on the team. I am the translator for the neuroscientist
Yep. Yep.
into the spiritual and human conversation.
Just as
Because my
important.
colleague, it is totally important. My colleague, if you ask him this question, he will say things to you that you're like the average person, or even medical doctors are like, what did he just say?
Yeah.
And then
Right.
it's
Right.
my
Right.
job to translate for him, just so
Yes.
you have that context, right?
Yes.
So what we want to look at is that we want to regulate the nervous system at that deepest level. We want to think about and include the brain. We want to think about that we actually in the brain have a map and an understanding for all of our human experiences. And so if we go to that construct of we have to put out those good vibes, what another way you're saying it is, I want my amygdala that is focused on joy to get more airtime.
And this is where consciousness comes into the equation, because some of these things, the amygdala, whichever it's the right or the left being activated, is a subconscious, it's being
Totally.
activated whether we know it or not. And so that is where, okay, when you increase your self-awareness and you apply intention, you become aware of what's going on and you start to tap into the body and what you're feeling and whatever. And then this is where we get the opportunity to use this as a tool.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right. And now we start to understand that we can't scream at the amygdala, plural, to stop worrying, just like we can't in our mind, in our awareness thoughts, say stop worrying, because it's just going to create more on an actual neurological level. So it's better to shift gears, and allow for the cerebellum, and therefore the amygdala, also the vagus nerve, also the default mode network, which is a network of communication that basically tries to help us understand who we are and what is normal. It's the one that gets dismantled with psilocybin, if anybody's ever experienced psychedelic mushrooms.
Okay.
So the ability to step outside of that illusion is regulated a lot by the default mode network, and
Wow.
how we automatically, like, let's say, piss off or overwork our default mode network is to try to overthink and solve things at the level of the mind.
Very interesting. So,
So
in that scenario, when let's say I'm really stressed out and I don't want to be stressed out, and so I want to tell my mind, stop worrying right now, what's the alternative?
yeah, I mean, I would say lay it down, because for most of us, we're not going to find a solution when we're freaking out. When we're freaking out, it's usually, and I'll explain it in more detail about what the action steps are. But when we're freaking out, our prefrontal cortex, the forehead part of our brain, is going off. And when we have one of those going on, it could be a 30% pull of our total energetic, meaning actual electrical impulses of the brain, the power of the brain, 30% of it can go to just the freak out. So remember, we're still running a heartbeat,
Wow. Yeah.
digestive system. We're still running our ability to walk and talk and move around. And meanwhile, 30% of our horsepower is totally just bleeding out to the freak out.
Wow.
So the first thing that we want to do is recover from the freak out, because we will not make good decisions in that state. We don't even have the it's called the executive function. It doesn't matter if you're an executive or not. A 5-year-old has a quantifiable executive function, right? Neurologically. So executive function, meaning the ability to take abstract concepts and navigate. It's kind of like that higher order of intelligence and strategic or rational thinking. So um, our executive function is not available to us until we calm down. So I say this because it could sound like I'm just saying, oh, just calm down. It's all fine. And it's like, oh, just be woo. And like, it's all bliss and bunnies and it'll all be lovely. No,
Right.
calm down like it's your job. Calm down like, okay, right now I'm having a freak out. And my job, therefore, is to calm my nervous system like a full task. Don't let it bleed out in the background, because
Yes.
that can go on for weeks, days, decades.
Yes.
But instead dive into the right now of it. I mean, in some cases, it's like cancel your upcoming meeting and stay home and take care of yourself, or do whatever you've got to do to get back online. So then, as far as the practicality, like what does someone actually do? It's going to vary a bit person to person, and it could vary day to day. It could vary over the course of their lifetime what their best tools are. For some people, it might be go have a really hard workout. For some people, it might be go and be held by the arms of your loved one and don't talk, right? For some people, it might be go and have conversation, right? But even before we go to reach for something that is outside of us in that way, like even exercise is a little bit outside of us, we have to go do the thing, and it takes a while for those endorphins to kick in. The first thing that we want to do, the very, 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 very first thing, timeless soul on an endless journey. This thing that is causing my freak out right now is here to serve me. This thing that is causing my freak out right now will not matter in 1 year, 10 years, 100 years. This is a blue dot spinning in the middle of the universe. And probably my entire lifetime will both greatly matter and totally not matter in the grand scheme of things, no matter how important I think I am right now, no matter how important I think this thing is right now. Right. And so you immediately have this shift in perspective that signals to your body a sense of safety, because you're not even engaging in the topic. If you're like, it's okay, I have money coming in, the bills, and and like you're still going to work it through at the level of the mind, versus this zoom out perspective shift reframes everything.
I love that. The zoom
And
out. The zoom out. Like take on the bird's eye view. One of my favorite things that's ever been said on this podcast is that sometimes you need to take yourself out of the forest to see the trees. Right.
yeah, totally.
So I love the zoom out, because that is exactly what it is. It's a conscious reframe. It's not thinking your way out of the situation. It's actually removing yourself from the situation and recognizing that the importance is nowhere near the grandiose degree you've allotted it, right?
Yeah, totally.
And that's it.
You
And
could,
it's so funny that you say that, because that is exactly what I did today in a way that allowed me to say, I've I I know that this is coming up. However, in the grand scheme of things, sometimes I go in my mind, like, if I were to get into a car accident right now and things were to stop and they would cease to, everything would be okay that I'm stressing out about right now, and it would be handled later. Like something could
totally.
have the opportunity to take absolute priority over this bill or this fight that you just had with a friend or something like that,
Hmm.
would take absolute priority, and it would be no questions asked. So it brought me back to, like, at the end of the day, I am safe, and this is not going to matter long term. And at the
Right.
end of the day, in my mind, sometimes I do almost put myself in like worst case scenario, but it helps me actually more than hurts me. And it's different for each person. But in my mind, I'm like, if I were to get into a car accident right now, this wouldn't matter, right?
It wouldn't. Yeah,
So
it totally
yeah,
wouldn't.
yeah,
And sometimes, for some people, they may not want to think of that because it could feel too
sure, yeah.
intense, but it could be. I've played with this one before, and it's such a good tool. Somebody will say, "Well, I can't possibly," da, 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 and that means that I can't, da, 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 and they're like really convinced of their own, like they're the hamster on the wheel. They've come to me to get off of it, And then they're not arguing in a bad way, but they're like arguing to each point that I might make. And I'm like, what would happen right now if you just called in sick for the next day? And they're like, oh, but I can't. I never call in sick. I'm like, never? Have you ever like done projectile vomiting to the point that you can't attend your meetings? Okay, so let's just pretend that you're projectile vomiting and you can't possibly, because nobody wants to hear you rat show up to your meetings. Would you be okay? And they're like, ugh. It's like I'm taking from their clutches, right?
Yeah.
And those finger gripped clutches are there because of primal fear.
Yeah.
I will be kicked out of the tribe. I will cease to have relevance. I will not be loved. These are the kind of things that make people actually drive. But what the symptomology is I'm a martyr of a mother. I'm too important at work. I couldn't possibly. Everything will fall without me.
Mm.
It's like we're not creating sustainable regenerative systems if we don't have the ability to step back. If nobody else knows how to do what we do, we actually need to change our life.
Wow. I think that's so because the self-importance that we are, like you just said, we're using ourselves almost as martyrs, and this is not fitting the longevity of the human race, or even if you are aware of these things, if you're the only one who's able to show up and complete the task, who is that really helping? You
Right. And are you just an enabler for other people to be in their weakness rather than someone that empowers others?
know?
Right. There's very little that no one
Yep,
else can do.
yep.
So who are we being as leaders, and what does that mean for our life? And if we are struggling with self-importance, or are we valuable enough? Are we doing enough? Then that is seen in those kind of patterns as they replicate out through our family systems, our teams, and our communities.
Wow, that really, like, definitely hit me deeply because I see it in my own patterns of I'm like, well, I have to hop on this or I have to be, active on here because my voice is so unique and so it has to be reached in a way and I have to show up in this way so that it can be reached. And I think that there's a beautiful dance that we do with our ego that, we have to be able to integrate it. We can't eliminate it. The point is
No,
kill the ego because that would be just be silly because again it's this idea of suppressing and giving even more power to, but like the dark side of it. And so it's all about like coming back to that pie that we began this episode with, is that it's okay to love yourself and recognize your gifts and that you do have a unique voice and a unique expression, and that the offering of your voice when it is from a pure place of love but not self-importance is a beautiful exchange. But you have to be very conscious, and I think specifically in the spiritual community, because I have
Mhm.
started to be a lot more active and learn things and meet people and go places. And I think that I just had this conversation with two of my very close friends, that there is such a dark side of the conscious community that has become so aware of certain things that now they feel they've transcended the ego. And I've caught myself even being in that same position. So this is not to say like I've already surpassed the idea of transcending the ego and whatever, because I know that I get there and my ego can speak very loudly sometimes and I can be operating from that place. But I know that I don't want to be. And so it is interesting to observe, like, when you think that you've surpassed the ego, that's probably when the ego is in control.
Totally. I mean, I've been on this path 30 years. That's not meant as a brag, just as a context frame. Am I there yet? No, there's no there to be there.
Exactly.
If
Yeah.
I thought I was there, I need to start over.
Yes, exactly.
That's
And
it.
it's not the point even. Like
No.
I read something the other day too where it was like the goal is not enlightenment. Like that the goal is like, of course we want to do the most that we can possibly to experience this part of the amygdala that is joy, that is bliss, that is love, that is depth, that is connection, that is actualization, right? But self is already actualized. And so our job is to experience that. It is not to become something outside of what we are right now whatsoever. And so, yeah, I don't know. It's such an interesting process, right?
Yeah, totally. Yeah, I like how you said that the goal is not enlightenment. I would frame it that the goal is freedom,
Yes.
right? Um,
Yeah.
and so freedom is, again, it's like love or any other thing exists on a gradient. There's relative states of freedom. And when people will confuse is that they want financial freedom or they want time freedom. But I think what they actually want is freedom to express themselves and to be their fullest creation, to be their fullest self,
Feel
to be
safe
able
to
to
do it.
actualize,
Yeah.
to be able to have a sense of spaciousness. My schedule doesn't have like a ton of spaciousness in it because I'm a single mom and I run a company and I'm, like all the different things that I'm doing. Okay, fine. But how I feel inside of my schedule is extremely spacious because I'm living the best I know how inside of this divine alignment with myself and with my path. And I'm not living at the expense of my calendar or at the expense of my aptitudes or my drive. Because so many of us actually are born with this feeling. This is something that is kind of new on this planet. And I think it's, and I know how beautiful it is like this drive to serve, this drive to discover and unleash the fullness of mission, this feeling of I chose to come here and I'm born for something. Um, but then what we can do with that is it actually internally collapse ourselves because we don't feel like we're doing it, or we feel like that we have to work as a slave to basically do what we came here to do, which is help to co-create freedom. And there's an inherent conflict if we're doing it inside of slave paradigm, if we're doing it inside of martyrdom, or like you were pointing to earlier, which is so important to talk about, the toxicity of the spiritual community that can be present that says, well, I'm going to compete. I've done 400 ayahuascas. How many have you done? Oh, I go to yoga X number of times, or like, I need to make this ritual performance on Instagram or whatever it all is. And it's like, okay, but ultimately, if we're praying to the holy altar of that which is the divine inside of us, it isn't something that we'll be able to directly communicate or translate. It will be something that we live from. It's a place, it's a feeling. It exists inside of our body. If we aren't in touch with our body, we cannot possibly regulate our nervous system. We also cannot possibly fully achieve the mission that we came here for.
I feel like you just need to take a deep breath and
Yeah.
like receive everything that has been said in the last however minutes we're talking, because we just talked about time collapsing, and I that's why I started this podcast, right? Is because I do truly believe that when we're able to have conversations where I'm just so locked in and other person so locked in, that it's the collapse of time and it's just full presence. And that the first time that I ever connected kind of like the icky guy of like flow state and what you're good at and what you can make money do, is like I really connected it to my flow state being in conversation with other people, and this idea of just sharing and being so open to receive what another person is saying,
Mm.
so locked in. And I just love that. I just love it
I
so
do too. And I was feeling that about you earlier, by the way. I'm on quite a number of podcasts and I can appreciate about you. And I'm not just saying this because I'm on your show and because I want to make you feel good. I actually can't be paid to lie to people, just so people know. Like, I have a lot of clients with a whole lot of money and I could charge a lot of money, and I will not at any point fluff their pillow because that is an egregious crime upon my own self, in
yeah.
addition to how I feel about them. So in the context of that, what I wanted to say is that I'm appreciating how dropped in you are and that we're having this experience together, because really everything else outside of this moment and outside of the truth of what it is that we're tapping into together is not a part of the current reality for us.
Yes.
Right. And we are co-creating inside of this space. Co-creating doesn't mean collaborating like we learned how to do in a science project when we were a junior in high school. Right. That is not, it's not of the mind. It is of the energetic field. So your ability to drop into your heart and my ability to drop into my heart, and for us to be present with each other, that's the biggest gift we can give each other. That's
Yes.
the biggest gift. That's where we find our biggest gifts. And I'm so grateful that you know that, and that you're bringing that not just through this conversation, but through your work to the world. So, you're a beautiful role model and example for what is possible inside of that. So thank you for being that. Yeah.
Thank you so much, and thank you for like I received that fully.
Yes.
And for sharing that. I really appreciate you seeing me and like putting that into words, because it's really nice to hear, and I see the same and I feel the same from you, and that's why I think I'm so dropped in, is because I just feel this alignment. And so
Yeah.
yes, it
It's
feels
a body feeling, right? And I think that that's part, and I'm sure it translates somewhat for the listeners, but we're having a body feeling, we're having something where we're actually, what's incredible is we're navigating everything from neurosciences to like the meaning of reality and life to like how do you actually, navigate the moment of freak out when you open up a bill. Like that's a huge spectrum,
Oh, yeah.
right? But it's not at the level of the mind. And it's with both of us genuinely inside of that collaborative space, not trying to impress each other. And therefore, more impressive things happen. Oh, this is a good weave back over. So, we've been talking a lot about how we maybe think of ourselves as too important, right? But that's the fake self. Like, that's the artificial trying hard self. That part is being too important for its own. Like, it's got too big of britches on,
Yeah.
but if we come over into this realm where we're not working from these subconscious or conscious competitiveness, judgment, divisiveness, we're genuinely in a heart connected space. We are actually in touch with our infinite, and we are therefore in touch with how deeply impactful and important we are as unique individuals with our unique voices and our unique expressions in this particular lifetime.
And I think that the more that I have noticed when I am acting out of self importance, the more that I realize that I'm doing myself a disservice when I don't recognize the divine in literally everything, but specifically everyone else. Because if I'm
Yes.
always saying, I'm, oh, like I'm special and, so unique, and like it's almost kind of, it's like it's it's putting a blanket over the idea of putting yourself on a pedestal and above other people. So what I
Mm,
have really tried to be so aware of is when I do catch myself, because I think that you work with a lot of high performers. And so I know that because I have been an achiever and just since the day that I that I was born, I feel like that's been in how I was raised and just how I go about things. And as a student, as an athlete, and then an entrepreneur, it's like the achiever status can sometimes come up in placing yourself above other people. And I have had to become so aware of that and be so vulnerable and so honest about it because I do know that
mm,
my heart is of so much pure love and recognition and appreciation and gratitude for other people that it's okay for me to have these feelings sometimes because it does not mean that I'm a person who acts out of this place all of the time, but to become aware of this and shine light on this and allow other people also to say, like, hey, I can be of love and still have these thoughts. That is okay. Let's bring myself back to a point of recognizing you for being this divine creation that you are because I have so much to learn from you and a skill set could be in a completely different language and it is equally as valuable as my own. And if you're an artist and I am a mechanic, we are absolutely in positive, exchange of the
yeah.
facets of the human experience, right? So,
Whew.
yeah, yeah.
Well said. Yes, well said. Because in that moment, what you're saying is, I draw you near and I see me in you and you in me. And I actually am living inside of the oneness experience instead of letting those subconscious parts of self create basically make believe hierarchy,
Yes.
right? Like it's a make believe thing, and the hierarchy and that subconscious drive doesn't make us wrong or shameful. It makes us human, right? Like, yeah, guess what? In addition to being a top performing athlete and student and drive in all the ways you were, you also have some wounds, even if they weren't egregious. There are things that we inherit from our epigenetics, from our society, the implicit things that our parents teach us, even if they were awesome parents. And then there's the whole slew of things that can happen inside of non-awesome parents and traumatic, environments and experiences. So we don't want to judge ourselves then. And I'm hearing you say that, right? Like you don't want to judge yourself for it, but rather get real. Because as soon as you get real, you can actually regulate your nervous system in different ways. You can actually make different strategic decisions. You can actually clear the thing that's underneath the surface that's driving, right? Because otherwise we're subconsciously driven by all of this stuff. And we then can scream at the outcome or point a finger to other people and not take accountability. There's all kind it's a very complex game, this whole human reality. It's like,
So
it's
complex.
a whole thing.
Yes. And this is just clicking in my mind. I gave a workshop and I was talking about communication and its relation to reintroducing the nervous system to visibility in your self expression. But I think that also
Mm,
in dealing with your emotions, this is clicking in my head where it's like reintroducing your nervous system to visibility, your emotions to visibility, saying, I feel this and it's okay, and not running away from that or being like, this is wrong to feel. So it's the
totally.
visibility of your emotions. And then it is only like grown tenfold if you are able to be vulnerable enough to share that with
Yeah.
someone that you feel safe with. And that is something that
Yeah.
I have noticed so much. Not everybody is somebody that you want to open up and share these things with, but when it does feel like in your body where this is, we're both dropped into the heart and we're both sharing in this open space that feels safe. When you can share that with another person you feel safe with, then it allows that visibility and safety in that visibility to just expand tenfold.
Yeah, totally. You can play around inside of shadows for decades or lifetimes, right? The shadow of self, hiding that shadow, inventorying the shadow, like thinking about maybe clearing up the shadow, putting it on the to-do list, pushing it to tomorrow, suppressing it with some stuff that numbs us. Like there's that whole loop. But the thing that immediately dispels shadow is light. And as soon as we bring something into that conversation in that sacred way with somebody that can just see us, they don't even have to know what to say. And I think that's important is that none of us has to know what to say. Again, coming back to it's the presence. So if we can hold presence for one another as we just speak what it is, and that by itself can penetrate through just like a dark room with a light switch turning on, and everything can change. Yeah, that witnessing in that presence it's so massive. Yeah. Something else that I love that you said is the visibility of emotions. And I feel like that's something that I learned early on that I wasn't aware that not everybody was aware of. Just the course of education that I ended up on is that everything that we experience has a neurological correlate, right? So if we're having an experience that's blissful or terrible, super painful, dysregulated, like deeply connected, whatever all of these ranges are, lost in thought, not present, whatever. All of those have extremely detailed. So a lot of what's available inside of popular science is like, well, you're either in theta waves or it's gamma, or like I don't even know. Like it's just so funny what's out there to me. Like
Yeah.
I love all the people for the stuff that they're spreading, but there's two amygdala. And I know I don't know everything either, but I like to make sure that what I do speak is very accurate. So inside of that, there are so many different ways that there are thousands or hundreds of thousands of like almost equations of factors and variables that are all going on simultaneously inside of the brain that then relate to our ability to perceive visually or our feeling of emotion or our ability to perform at sports or whatever it is that we're doing. And so there's a way that we can also be very neutral, like, oh, my nervous system is having a freak out right now, right? And how do we know what's going on with our nervous system? It's going to be through what's going on with our breath, what's going on with our physical body. Like, do we actually feel ourselves sitting on our chair, or do we feel our feet on the earth? Or are we sort of like so tight through the glutes and yanking up like that? We're like, and not, are we breathing? Are we, um, are we using words like or whatever too often in a sentence? That can be a signature. I've helped people to guide their nervous systems deeper by just noticing that a lot of, especially women want to be really friendly. And so they talk like this and they're not in their body and they're actually inhaling on every word instead of exhaling on every word. Mhm.
Interesting.
This is the sign of a dysregulated nervous
That
system.
is a new one. I've actually never heard that before. I've correlating the nervous system to the voice and how you might be dysregulated if you're inhaling on every breath and you're speaking from the head voice almost. That's super.
Mhm. I find it's true, especially with younger people, that because they're not necessarily taught to drop into their power and they haven't necessarily had that opportunity to learn to drop into their power, it's not something that I'm perceiving at all for you. Like the feeling of our words as they move through our body, there should be a resonance that rolls through. And so if we're tight in the vocal cords or if we're tight in our energy in general, then it's all up in the head. And probably everything that's coming out, well, let's just say there's a high likelihood for garbage,
Yeah.
right? Like it's probably somebody in there thinking and not dropped in enough to know where they're really at or to be strategically they're not safe enough to be in that penultimate of strategy. Their prefrontal cortex is regulating, their amygdalas are going off, their vagus nerve is flipping out because they're assessing that there is danger.
Yep. Yes.
And so we don't really know who they are in that moment, and neither do they. And so we can guide that person, or we can feel that if that's ourself, we can guide that person, not necessarily by mentioning it. We don't want to like make people feel super tripped out, but it's like, you can maybe guide them in the conversation, or, hey, why don't we go for a walk right now instead of sitting in this loud cafe? Would that feel good? You know what I mean? Like, how do we shift these environments to really nurture ourselves and each other and just take these clues and cues? I think the other thing that I really want to mention is that in the field of neurosciences, that these patterns can be reset with extreme precision. And so there's so many different ways to get after that, even within the field. But I would say that one thing that I do want to make clear is that there exists this thing called neurofeedback therapy. And that's at the core of a lot of what we do in our on-site work with folks. But I want to talk about it in terms of how it works generally, because it's available other places as well. And it's actually available for at-home use for not that expensive in a safe way. So I want to be able to paint that picture, right? So neurofeedback therapy works by putting sensors on the scalp. Our brain is actually an electrical system. It's also a neurochemical system. There's also field effects, which are more magnetic. There's a lot going on in the brain. But the EEG is the study of the electricity of the brain as it's happening. It's not putting any electricity in, it's just measuring. So that can be taken in a really comprehensive picture, and basically the entire reality that someone's having can be understood in terms of their EEG. Oh, a propensity to overthink. Oh, they have probably got some early childhood trauma stuff going on. Oh, they have troubles with memory, or they have a hard time holding specifically numbers, or they're dyslexic, but only with letters, not with numbers. Like, this is all available inside of the EEG. Yeah. Also, if they're intuitive or not, if my colleague knows how to read for whole other levels of, let's just say, superpowers and capacities, but that's an aside. So the EEG is that original map that has like hundreds of thousands of data points measured down into the seconds and milliseconds that then tell us kind of everything. What neurofeedback does is it takes the information that's in real time being measured with a real time EEG instead of a static picture. It's like a movie, and the brain is being fed back how it's doing, but the mind doesn't understand. So the brain is hearing things or hearing and seeing things on a screen. And the brain is saying, oh, wait a minute, I'm supposed to be hearing that lovely music or the sound of water or something. And the brain, if it's not hearing that, if it's maybe not seeing a cue on a screen, it reroutes how it's working. We don't know how that works. We also don't know how it's making our heartbeat. Thank God, because we wouldn't know how to do that, right? It's too complicated.
Yeah.
So what we're doing then is we're having the brain communicate with a computer about how it's doing, and knowing that the brain is actually regulating every bit of everything downstream, every organ, the vagus nerve, all of the whole nervous system, but also our thoughts, our feelings, our emotions, and our perception of reality, right? Our ability to be intuitive beings is being regulated at the level of the brain. It's also being influenced at the level of the mind. But when we work with the brain
That's
directly,
really important to draw that distinction. It's being regulated by the brain, influenced by the mind.
yeah.
Wow. Yeah.
Well, so at Hold On, again, merging science and spirituality, the mystical and the quantifiable. So the reason why I spend so much time talking about the frame, timeless soul on an endless journey, and everything that we've discussed here is because even if we give somebody incredible neurofeedback therapy that is a direct message into their brain that they are safe, their brain will grow and their brain will signal them for more safety. But we leave a large amount of the benefit on the table because they don't actually change their cognitive perception in a way that they can track. So we always want to know, like, you don't just randomly work out if you wanted to like run a marathon. You've got to have a bit of a program. You've got to get your headspace on. Like, this isn't a small thing, right? So if you want to make really strategic changes inside of our neurology, inside of our spiritual capacities, and be able to really live out our life in that fullest expression, then we have to have the strategy of all of it. because there isn't a machine, nor is there a psychedelic medicine, nor is there any power outside of ourselves that is more powerful than the belief that we have about ourselves. How we believe, who do we believe we are, and what do we feel is possible? That will always trump to some extent, like compress in everything else that is available to us. Because the truth of it is that we are designed to be walking miracles. We are, in fact, and we're also designed to be able to have access to the unlimited and be in a state of bliss and joy and to true freedom. So I kind of put it like this. It's like, hey, look, if you're not having kind of a consistent low grade orgasm experience, not necessarily sexual, I'm just talking about like, if you're not having a life orgasm right now, then you're blocking and there's fun things to handle because that's the goal, right? If we were to describe it in a body sense, how much bliss can you hold while you also move through the 3D world?
And what I read something the other day, a while ago, actually, it wasn't the other day, but it stuck with me so much, is that it's not about adding new things. It's more about removing those blockages. Of
Yeah.
course, you're going to like, receive new wisdom, but it's so much more about the removing than it is about the addition of things, you know?
Right. Yeah. It's that pathology of like, must do more, have more, be more
Uh,
versus just like actually just remove
Yeah.
that which is not. Yeah. Yeah. Such a good point. Yeah,
Uh,
totally. So, anyways, the ability to reshape how the neurology is functioning, along with the framing, along with the strategy and the depth of understanding on that mental level, changes everything of everything of everything, no matter what neurofeedback. Neurofeedback therapy works for people in a coma, for people that are not able to speak or communicate on any level. Like it just works.
mm,
But I love working with what's possible, right? Like the how far can we take this? So that's the part about the framing. And neurofeedback therapy is available, in many small clinics around the country. Something that I asked my colleague. So I work with Dr. Drew Pearson. He's co-founder of Holon. He is the preeminent, I would say, wizard level, ridiculous genius scientist in the entire world
awesome.
for applied neurosciences. So knowing how to get real-time change, real-time learning from for these folks that come, to this style of neurofeedback therapy that we have. And specifically within that, it is his capacity to work for consciousness and wisdom and leadership traits in building intuition and things like this. So there are plenty of practitioners who can help people with ADHD or, like there's a lot of things that neurofeedback therapy can genuinely really help. But that's his jam. So when I first really dove in with him was about 13 years ago. And I was like, this is neurofeedback therapy, even with a regular clinician, if an initial brain map costs for an average clinician $800 to take and then review, and then each appointment might be $150, and then you have to go once or twice a week for however many weeks to be able to get to that incremental goal. It's expensive, and people cannot afford that necessarily. And although we work with the elite, honestly, inside of our programs, we really do. It's a strategic move. It's not an elitist move.
Yeah.
We want betterment of all of humanity. Let's touch the people that are touching millions of people's lives.
Yeah. Yeah.
But that
Yeah.
said, how do we help the everyday person? Because our hearts are that of healers.
Mm.
It's not coming from that place. So I told him a long time ago, we have to figure out a way to make this more approachable. And then we've been working together for most of the last 13 years, but during the last number of years, he actually developed it kind of as an off to the side. So this doesn't have anything to do with Holon directly, but there's a product called Sensei, and it's spelled SENS.ai is the website.
Oh.
Sensei, like the Japanese teacher, right?
Uh-huh. Uh-huh.
Or I think Japanese. So anyway, that headset does neurofeedback therapy. It does laser through the skull to like basically benefit the brain. So therapeutic light to straight to the brain. And then it also does not just HRV, heart rate variability tracking, but it also trains for it, which is sort of its own wormhole. But HRV has everything to do with actual physical cardiovascular health over time, but it also is a massive way to regulate the nervous system. So people can train for alpha, which helps them to benefit in much of the same ways that meditation does, because it's a meditative state. And they can also do SMR, sensory motor rhythm. So that's incredible for focus and also for athleticism. But the ability to, be a little bit less ADHD, which I think is kind of becoming another pandemic, like
Oh,
it's a
yeah,
whole, yeah. So
absolutely.
that's all baked into that headset and it's safe to use for most people. I can't say every listeners, if you're listening, please read the contraindications,
Yep.
use it your own risk. I don't really know anybody on this call except for you. But what I can say is that I actually trust this piece of equipment. I would say that and then there's also the Neurovisor, which has nothing to do with us. It's just my favorite, relatively inexpensive biohacking, completely change your reality tool. And it's we can put it in the show notes, the link for that one too. But I really, really want for everybody to be able to hold this framework that we've helped to create today in our conversation. And then if they wanted to do something that directly impacts the brain by standard deviations in ways that are proven by like Stanford and Harvard researchers that are safe to use at home, that these two things, generally speaking, are safe as long as there's not a contraindication. Like you can't have epilepsy and use the Neurovisor or, certain brain traumas, things like that. But these are incredible tools and they go straight into the heart of things in that way because they impact the brain directly, which then impacts our perception of reality and everything downstream in our nervous system and can change your life. Like that is huge. Yeah.
Well, I really appreciate you bridging the things that you're doing that are they are expensive at the end of the day, right? Like some of the things, and
Yep.
then bringing it down to a relatively inexpensive um, you know approach to someone who is interested in something like this. And so
Mhm.
I really appreciate that. We'll definitely put links to pull an experience, anything else that you would like to provide listeners with, if it's a deeper dive into your work, would love
Yeah.
links for that. And I'll put all of the products that Dr. Amy mentioned in the episode description. And
Yeah.
I just want to say thank you so much. I'm so happy that we did this today and that it came at the time that it did, because Dr. Amy and I connected about a month ago, or maybe a month and a half ago. I don't know when it was. Again, we talked about
Yeah.
it lots of times. Who knows? But I'm so glad that we had this conversation today, and that the energy I was in was the energy I'm in today to be able to co-create this space with you.
Isn't it
Uh,
wonderful how
yeah.
it all works out? So
Yes,
beautiful.
and it's such a testament, because yes, it all does work out. Divine timing, the perfect place, perfect time, perfect people,
Mhm.
like just amazing. So Dr. Amy, thank you so much. If there's anything else that you do want to share or anything else you want to mention before we conclude today's episode, please feel free to.
Yeah, thanks, Gabby. One last thing, and as far as resources, so for people that do want to visit our website, I feel like I just scratched the surface of what it is that we're doing. So it might be interesting, and it is an educational website in its core. But the thing that I really want to call out is that I have provided a free audio to anybody that wants to download it. And that audio all by itself has changed people's lives. And it sort of feels like a meditation, but it's actually not. It's teaching you tools and skills that you can use throughout your whole waking world as you move through life that immediately regulate the nervous system, that drop us into a calmer state, that have us feel into our bodies in a certain way, that have us automatically be able to zoom out and have that perspective that we were talking about. So, in addition to, what we were saying about the very first thing is to remember timeless soul on an endless journey. I do want to offer that this tool, if you just listen to the recording once, it's with you for the rest of your life. It's always with you. You can use it in the middle of a conversation. You can use it while you're driving. It involves breath, and I call it the whole on breath practice, but it is not like the huff and puff breath work where you look like a weirdo. It's very, very subtle, and it can be utilized throughout. And that tool all by itself, Gabby, is changing people's lives. And it's super important to me that more and more people know about that. So, yeah, feel free to go, listeners, to the website and just download that. And
I'll put a direct
um,
link to the download, to the free
oh,
download
sweet.
in the
Yeah,
episode description, so that if you're listening to this and you're like, oh, yeah, I want to try that out, just look at the show notes and you'll see the direct link. So I'll make sure to put that in there.
awesome. Great idea.
All right, you guys, thank you so much for tuning in to today's episode. I hope that you were able to drop into the heart space and receive everything that we shared today. And if you guys have anything that came through that you want to share with me, I'm always available and I'm very eager to have those exchanges. So Instagram, email, and then again, Dr. Amy, if you do want to connect with her, she'll have that contact information in the show notes. So thank you guys, and thank you, Dr. Amy, and I will see you guys next
Hmm.
on the Gabby Rosley podcast.
Hold up now, y'all.
before you head out, I need to say thank you. Thank you for listening to this episode, and most importantly, thank you for making the conscious decision to invest in yourself and expand your mind, heart, and spirit. Because you showed up for you, you are helping others live better lives. Whether you know it or not, you are inspiring others daily. And if you're feeling fired up, keep the domino effect alive and share this episode with someone that you love. If you're feeling extra saucy, leave the show a review because it really, really helps me out. And come back and hang with me again sometime. New episodes every other Monday at 8 a.m. Keep shining your unique light. I see you, and I love you.